Welcome to Midwest Architecture and Design. My name is Jordan Powers. I'm a photographer based in southern Minnesota, photographing projects across the Midwest for architects, designers, and builders. And today I'm talking with Matt Byers and Mark Stankey from Plaad Architects based in Minneapolis. Now, I've been following Matt and Mark for years, and I love their work, but what I wasn't prepared for is how much I would actually love their story, and I think you will too. They talk a lot about how Plaid came to be, and they talk a lot also about where the Plaid name came from, which I found very interesting. Now, if you've watched or listened to the first episode of this podcast, you know that one of the main purposes of this podcast is to learn more about the architecture and design process. And in this episode, we definitely learn about the process. Mark and Matt both share a couple stories from different projects and just the level of thought that has to go into a project. We also talk about how architecture is not just, it doesn't have to be a luxury thing. It can be something that everybody thinks about just in their everyday environment. So I hope you enjoy and get as much out of this episode as I did. Now, if you want to follow along with their work, you can do so at plaadoffice.com, or you can go to them on Instagram at plaadoffice. You can find me online at jordanpowersphotography.com or at jordanpowers without the vowels on Instagram. In the meantime, enjoy this episode with Plaid. Well, hey, first of all, thank you guys so much. It's great to finally meet you. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with me for a little bit. I'm excited to get to know you guys a little bit. So let's just start from the beginning. How did all this start? I know we talked a little bit before we started recording about how this all came about, but let's just talk through it. How did everything get started?
Well, Plaid started in 2013, 2014. Both Matt and I had jobs at great firms, great corporations, and got an opportunity from another silent partner that's involved in Plaid that reached out and said, are you interested in starting a firm? We've got a project in Jackson Hole that you might be interested in. And at the time, I think both of us were like, well, I don't know, we'll see, maybe, maybe not. And a couple of things changed in my life before that, and that kind of pushed me into a place where I was more interested in pursuing having a firm of my own or with a partner. And this opportunity arose. Stuff at my current or at that employment was not like my dream situation, but just wasn't a good fit, and decided to take a leap and go out there and visit Jackson Hole, see what it was all about, and took a look at it and said, I wouldn't do this without Matt Byers, and reached out to Matt and said, hey, what do you think? And I'll let you take it from there because I think you've got a good lens on it too.
Yeah.
No, we both.
Well, really quick, you guys were working together at that point then too?
No.
Okay.
We started at James Dayton Design.
Okay.
At that point it was downtown Minneapolis,
right.
And we moved 2 doors down from our current office. And then the economy went south. 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah. Bubble burst.
Ad infinitum.
Yeah.
And so we both went our separate ways. But we knew when we were working at Jim Dayton's office that we really clicked. We worked well together. And we said, it'd be great to have a firm someday. Mm-hmm. But, that was 2006.
Right.
So when Mark called me, we had kept in touch, obviously, and running the same friendship circles from an architectural perspective. Got a call from Mark in 2013 that said, hey, do you have any interest? And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And then nothing happened for a while. Yeah. And then 2014 rolled around, and Mark called back and said, I think this is real. Do you want to do it? And at the time, my wife was 7 months pregnant with our first child. I had a great, full-time job at a corporate firm and moving up, which was fun. Mark did as well. Yep. Mark's wife was also pregnant with her second. We said, well, was it a better time to throw caution to the wind and jump out the door without knowing where you're going to land?
It's a big jump. You're going from, how long had you been with James Dayton?
Well, I started there right after grad school. That's when Mark and I met. Mark and I both came. Mark was in Montana. I was out in Connecticut. We kind of both moved to Minnesota. I was moving back, or I should say I was moving to. My wife is from here. Mark was moving back, and we both landed at James Dayton probably within 6 months of one another.
Oh, I see.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Yeah, and so then we were there, and then we migrated elsewhere in the community, the architectural community here in the Twin Cities during the downturn, and we're both fortunate to have stable full-time employment that whole time, which is great.
Yeah. I think I would say one thing that kind of helped the nudge, which is maybe a little bit of interest, is when I was at my job just before Plaad, or my career just before Plaad, during that time I had stage 3 cancer, diagnosed with that and fought through that, and had kind of a rough diagnosis moving forward, like who knows what's going to happen.
Right.
And it was kind of a gift because I don't know if I would have been willing to make the jump.
If it would have pushed you to,
because I was sitting there going, I got a great career, great job here, but my dream's always been to have my own firm. If I only got 5 years left, which was at the time a pretty likely scenario, I was like, no, I'm going to do what I want to do if it's the last 5 years I got. So
Right.
that did gave me a big nudge to go forward. And I think I would not have done it without Matt, just because we worked so well together in the past, and we kind of talk about it, or at least I do. Matt probably thinks it's cheesy. I don't. But the whole Bruce Springsteen thing, like 1 + 1 = 3, it's like when we work together, it seems to create more. Like just as the two of us make more than equals 2. So that was also a very big nudge to move forward. And that's where the things all looked good to be like, yeah, let's do this. Let's create something. So
at that point what was the formation like? Was that a long process, or did you kind of? I mean, I'm sure it was in many respects, but I mean, did you?
What year is it?
still happening. As we we're in a brand new location as well.
Yeah.
But the initial formation, at least, you had already been talking about it, and I know you said it. You had brought the idea up, and then it was still some time before it actually was officially formed. But that whole process, was it just figuring out your mission and
I'll answer something here.
Yeah.
So when I left my former employer, obviously I changed my LinkedIn to undisclosed, I think was what I put. I just put undisclosed. I don't know. We don't know what the name is, right?
Right.
And we're developing this project out in Jackson. I got licensed, or I had been licensed already. I got my license in Wyoming then to sign the drawings, and it came down to the point where we were going to be issuing drawings, and I said, I can't sign unless we have a firm name. I mean, so let's figure it out. And that was really the impetus of signing that first set of drawings for this big development out in Jackson. Yeah. And it's funny, one of my former colleagues said, that's an amazing name of a firm. I said, what was that? He said, undisclosed. He said, oh, that wasn't the name of the firm. I just didn't know what to put, because LinkedIn requires you to put in, a name. And I just said, I don't know, undisclosed. He said, that was a great name for a firm. I said, oh, maybe it is.
Yeah, it kind of feels like we had to jump on the first project. And during that first project, we really started formulating what we were going to be, right? Because there's a lot of conversations that had to be had. And this is a big enough project and long enough project that we had a lot of time, especially on the road, to think about it and talk about it.
A lot of trips out to Jackson on the plane where Mark and I are saying, well, what the hell are we going to call this thing?
Right.
And we had to figure it out by the time we submit drawings.
Right.
But, for some of the first submittals to the city, I don't even think we had a name on it. We just had a title block. And there was no name.
Yeah.
That was it. I said, well, let's see if we can get a...
Oh, we actually went with the development name.
We did.
We submitted with the development name.
Yeah. So anyway, a little fly by your pants. I mean, we're still doing it.
Well, interesting enough, like one of the initial, aside from your designs, one of the initial things that was attracted to me was your name. Like, it's just different. It's so different, and it's you know what I mean. I was intrigued, and then I discovered you had an acronym, which may have came after the fact. Who knows? But it fits well. So, like, where did the Plaad name come from?
Sure, I can answer that. I'll say first off, it was not my idea, which I credit to Matt and our other silent partner. But I would say that, strangely enough, the acronym, what the acronym stands for came first, because we were
interesting. Okay,
what we were identifying is what we were interested in. I think what we were seeing in the other firms that I don't want to be whatever we didn't like, and what I think clients didn't like is, either you get what that one designer does, and that's what you get.
Right.
And we felt like we had the horsepower to do all sorts of things, and that included product design competitions and art competitions, which we do. So we set out to be more of a creative. Like, I always looked at it almost more like the Eames office. Like, we want to be able to do anything that comes through the door that's interesting, and not just architecture.
Right.
So lasting was the first thing that came up, because I personally don't like the term timeless, because I don't believe anything is truly timeless. But we came up with lasting because we use this analogy of Ray-Bans all the time. Ray-Ban wayfarers will always be cool, no matter what decade, no matter what minute.
What if I'm wearing them?
Yeah.
Depending on who's wearing them, you're right. So I'm the same here.
You can rock shades. I would say that that was the first thing, was lasting. We wanted to bring that to clientele and say, look, clients want things that are lasting. They don't want to flash in the pan, and they also don't want to have one thing that is just that's what you get when you come to us. We wanted it to be more of a collaborative situation. Now, depending upon who's doing the designing in the office, it's usually myself or Matt, but the idea of Plaid as we moved forward was also that it was a bigger weave of people. Another thing we saw is that at certain firms you don't have staff or team members don't have as much agency. And we wanted to end that, because I think that was some things that we were maybe frustrated with in former firms, or at least I was, is to have more of a voice at the table. And we wanted it to be something bigger than we were in the end, that we could eventually, it's not Mark and Matt, you're coming to go see Mark and Matt.
Right.
We wanted to create something that's bigger than us. But
still keeping it small.
Right, and so that's where it came from, the practice of lasting art, architecture, and design. Because we're interested in art, we're interested in architecture, obviously, and design in general. And that once more like in the lens of the Eames office. And then we were like, wow, that is really close to Plaid. And Matt, I'll let you take it from there if you want to describe where that kind of
I don't even.
what the tart, I guess.
Yeah. So, well, the tartan actually came. I mean, the logo, the word mark, whatever you want to call it, that came after. I think we looked at it and we said Plaad, Plaid, and then for me at least, what really struck the deal was looking at the typeface that we used, and that it's the same vertical bar, whether it's a P or an L or a D, it's the same circular part of that typeface, so it looked great, right? And an A would have screwed it up, an I would have screwed it up. But then we said, well, there's also this, we're Minnesotans, right? There's this, it's almost a Scandinavian influence, and so it seemed right. And we really haven't looked back on it.
Yeah, and if I could, I mean, the interwoven idea of Plaid just as a thought that relates back to what we wanted to do with Plaid, which is make something bigger than just the two of us and make a design collaborative. So it actually became a graphic representation as Plaid, as what we're trying to accomplish with Plaid. And that, once again, it's bigger than us. It's strengthened by the people who are involved and the team members and our group, and that was the intent of, and how that kind of.
Well, it started to unpackage itself, right? When we started, Plaid, that's a great name, that's a great pronunciation of it, it's a great representation of what we are. But even if you start looking at Plaid, I mean, Plaid is an overarching name for Tattersall, gingham, Scottish tartan plaids, and so there's a lot of variety within that to say, and I think that goes with our mission. You're not going to come to us and have us prescribe a style for your home or a type of home you're going to get. We really want that to be a give and take. We really want to help them realize their dreams, right? So whether it's something incredibly modern, which we have a number of projects in the office right now which are incredibly modern, or more traditional, and we have some projects in the office right now that are incredibly traditional. A Norwegian vernacular, a typical Norwegian vernacular home right now, which is in the same less than a mile from a very modern home. So both coming out of our office, I think, reinforces that idea that we want to meet our clients where they're at. We don't want to be overbearing. Now, we're going to have opinions, And
as you should, yeah.
as we should,
Yeah.
and we're professionals in that arena, and we're going to have opinions and counsel our clients, for what we think works best with their lifestyle and the site and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I think what sets us apart is that we are not focused on one particular genre or style.
Yeah, it's about designing something that fits the class. So one of the things that I noticed particularly about your website is, obviously imagery is important because you want to show off what you're doing, but the way you've designed your website even is it walks somebody through what the process is actually like. Not saying you're the only architecture firm in the country that does that, but I'm just saying to back up a little bit, part of the reason I'm doing this, and I told you this before the interview, is because as a photographer who photographs primarily architecture, I don't know a lot about architecture, and I don't know a lot about the process of what you guys go through.
Sure.
So even going through your website as a photographer or even somebody who's a potential client in the future, you have it laid out to where it actually just, like, to navigate through the website, you're walking people through your process.
Yeah, actually,
it's working then. Good.
It is, and I would like to touch on that, and Matt, I'm sure you do too, because I'm glad that you picked up on that. I'm sure we both are, and I think that the thought behind it is we came into this and said we see a lot of firms that are incredible, and we love these firms, by the way.
Yeah.
They're incredibly highbrow, very academic in their research, but for a lot of people, and I mean like 99% of the people on the planet, they're unapproachable. You can't really work with them because it's so academic and so restrained and so
it's just not, it's not, as a layperson, somebody who's like trying to who doesn't really understand the process, like you have to talk to people from you have to meet them where they're at. Versus expecting them to come into it with an understanding of where you're at,
Well,
so.
Yeah, and I would say that when we see some of these other firms, we love their work, and some of the stuff is so restrained and so academic that they're not meeting, a bigger chunk of the public or a bigger chunk of the built environment in a way that you can apply some of that academia to, your academic approach to architecture. And then on the other hand, you have this other group of architecture, and I'm not trying to offend the architecture.
No, yeah, no,
here,
absolutely not. I'm sure they all understand too.
I will say that there's more of this production, no research at all, or very little research at all into some academic approach. There are some out there that do a really good job, but we felt like there was a hole there that we could reach more of the public with more academic approach in architecture that is studying site phenomena, the architectural connection to the site, and actually educate and bring clients a different level of service than just creating a beautiful object and creating a beautiful home, explaining strategies and how it connects to the earth and how it relates to the sun and how there's an inspirational, start point and a bunch of rigor behind the minute we start modeling for that client, and then we try to explain it to them. And Matt, it's a lot of diagramming and a lot of saying, I know your house is going to maybe be traditional, but we're still going to have an academic approach about how we're going to craft your home for you and how it's going to relate to the site and how it's going to be special. And we've found success in that. I think a lot of the clients realize that their house is not only crafted for them, but it does have an academic approach. And I feel like we felt that there was a gap there missing in architecture, and we're trying to get there. We're trying to fill that gap.
Well, I always tell clients, I use my mom as a litmus test, right? Because I used to teach too at the U, and teaching keeps you honest in one way, right?
Yeah.
But it also makes you realize, again, teaching is incredibly important, as is academic architecture. And I don't mean academic in terms of a genre of architecture, but I mean a mindset, right? But as we're meeting with our clients, we need to keep ourselves reminded, and this is why I use my mom as a litmus test. My mom knows 2 architects, and both are named Frank. Frank Lloyd Wright, Frank Gehry, the famous architects, right? But that's about it. And I would say that's probably and that's not meant to be derogatory, I just mean that's the general public, right? We're very specialized in our industry, but we sometimes become too hyper-focused, breathing our own exhaust, and not really thinking. We're building spaces for families. We're building spaces for people to raise families in, to live their lives, and whether or not there is some underlying hyper logic to the project, they may not care. They probably won't care.
Right.
It's important to us, I think, internally as designers that exists, but it's not going to be at the forefront of our discussions with the client. That's something that we try to say, you know what, if you're interested in it, and we have a project right now in Idaho where they are interested in that.
Yeah.
And that's a breath of fresh air. Right? I think at the end of the day, we're crafting beautiful spaces for people to raise their families in. And I think we say as much on our website, right?
Yeah.
Our memories, my earliest memories of architecture are hearing the floor creak or the screen door slam, right? I mean, that, to me, that's really important in how people live their lives. And we tend to get hyper-focused. I tend to get hyper-focused on, well, that wall isn't perfectly aligned and that screws the diagram up. But at the end of the day, like, they're never going to care.
They're not going to care, and they don't need to understand that either, really. Yeah. And there's some people who might be interested in that along the way. You know, like you may have some homeowners who want to be very involved in the process, and they want to understand those nuances just to like better understand what, I don't know, they want to be part of it. They want to feel like they literally had a hand in.
Well, don't get us wrong. That's why we love we love when we have the opportunity to explore to that depth, because that really does, I think, touch what made us both architects. You know, this underlying logic behind organization and design. That's really important. But in our firm, we want to temper that a little bit and make it more. Mark always brings up the term approachable modernism. When we're working on more modern projects in the office, we don't say this is ultra modern. We say it's an approachable modernism. It's somewhere you're comfortable in living. You don't feel controlled by the architecture.
Yeah, and to be direct on it, and this might be bottom line, we both are very concerned about the built environment and have a passion for the built environment. I feel like in the general overall sense, it could be much better. You know, we always talk about, I wish more people cared about the overall understanding of the built environment. I think one thing our profession, especially in Minnesota, or like in the Midwest, we tout a lot. We hear, oh, we care so much about the built environment, but there isn't a reach out to try to educate the public at a certain price point about what architecture can and cannot do. So where I get a little bit of heartburn is we're trying to reach more people and to create a better built environment, regardless of price point. And I wish our profession did that a little bit better here, is to try to reach all for that. And that doesn't just mean like with public spaces, that means with residences at any price point. And so we have a heart for the built environment. And if we really care about it, you start going out to certain suburbs where there is new construction, and there's a lot done without architects. And we're trying to do whatever we can in whatever price point or capture wherever and to make it better. And we're just trying to be more approachable and more malleable in how we can respond to clients and clients' needs. So
yeah, I think you and I are on a committee with AIA, and so like that's one of the topics that come up a lot as well. And what I've observed as somebody who's not an architect is that the general public, like they don't think of architecture or design for that matter beyond the commercial space usually, or they'll see like a modern home, they think architecture, like that's where their focus is limited. Right. Like design doesn't really expand beyond that unless there's somebody that's actually interested in design. So I guess with that said, how do you see that happening? I mean, obviously you can't just do it on your own. It's a whole mindset that you have to like get other people on board, and it has to be like a community effort. But like, what do you see being like the next steps, or what's needed, or what's missing to make that happen, to make the community more aware or more involved with design or architecture?
Good question. I'd say we've seen an uptick in it recently. Like we've had different builders reach out and be like, I've been told I gotta start having better design or having architects involved at these price points. The clients are demanding it. So it's great to have clients at a certain price point demand it. I'd love to see that trickle down farther and farther and have the pressure of, hey, we need to have better built environments for everyone. And I just think that the demand of it is what's going to obviously drive it. But I think a lot of I wish there was a better way to answer this, but I'd say that HGTV, a lot of people are seeing more design and seeing more modernism on TVs and on TV and commercials, and seeing all of the technology that can be involved. And
there's a positive and there's a balance.
Oh yeah, there's positives and negatives to all.
Because people think that we can just do it overnight. Like, well, I decided it was in a 30-minute episode.
Can you architect that up quick?
That's my favorite. My least favorite term. You're going to architect that? I would say I see that inflection point coming when we can communicate that it's a value proposition.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people will go out and buy a car, and they'll say, "Well, for not too much more, you can have heated seats." Right?
Mm-hmm. I just got sucked into that a couple weeks ago.
But
fell victim.
And I think it's a change in mindset where it's not when you're buying a house or building a house. You could build a 6,000 square foot house, but do you need it? You could design and be able to afford to have a professionally designed 4,000 square foot house,
or 1,500 square foot. Yeah, right.
And so that for people to make that connection, I think is really important. That it's not a right now. I think architecture is too often misconstrued as a luxury item.
Yeah.
Something I don't need, but if I am fortunate to have the ability to do it, I'm going to.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see it become more of less of a luxury item and more of a standard package, to say we think the built environment is, and I think it needs to be at a national level communicated, to say that the built environment is this important. They're doing as much on the commercial standpoint, right?
I think it'll get there. I mean, even in the smallest of industries, like customization is where it's at now. Like people can customize things to their own liking. And it's only a matter of time before it comes into their actual. I mean, it's already kind of there, but just like like we mentioned, HGTV or Pinterest, like all the DIY projects people are trying to do. Like people are trying to make spaces fit their lifestyle a little more. They're not quite there yet to where architecture is in the like mainstream vocabulary. You know what I mean? It's like that's not where they go first. It's usually what can I DIY. But I've always said, like, I've photographed a lot of houses. It doesn't take a lot to impress me, but if I'm in a McMansion, I don't want to be in there. I'm just not interested in seeing those anymore. Like my dream project would be like, if I could design a home, it would be like a 2,000 square foot home where every inch has a purpose. There's no extra space. Like I want something to be functional and no wasted space. Like that's.
It sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's actually easier to design with constraints like that.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, well, I need, I want a lot of space.
Mm-hmm.
For what? And I think what's interesting in this pandemic, people have been spending a lot more time at home saying, well, do I actually
need all this
space?
Right.
Do I need this? I think some changes recently where, accessory dwelling units are allowed for multi-generational families to exist, which makes a lot of sense everywhere in the world except here, right?
Yeah.
and where people say, well, that's interesting, and that solution came out of a design consideration, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense, and there's value in engaging a professional to suss out that value.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I just want to reiterate, I think and I think we're getting there. We're going down the right path, but looking at architecture is less of a luxury item, a nice to have, but more of a need to have. And to say, what are we willing to go without so that we can, and I don't mean, basic necessities, but what luxuries could we go out without that we rarely use in our home? And even with that, we'd be able to engage a professional to help really craft this space so it's special for us. I think that's where it needs to be.
You guys mentioned earlier that people view architecture primarily as a luxury item. Like, what does architecture, like from your perspective, need to do, like the industry as a whole, in order to, I don't know, like what's the next step, or how do we get to the point where it's not just viewed as a luxury item anymore? Like, I mean, how do we even get there?
That comes back to that Matt's value value add proposition. I think how we've approached it and what's worked really well for us is once again circling back to what you said about the website, is having the information and a little bit of that a little bit or a lot of it of that academic approach. And what we've found is what proves that to the client is, okay, we have site strategies. We commonly refer to the deck at our office as this project starts and stops with this deck, and it grows as the project goes along. And what it is it's a research document. It starts off as a research document, and that all of that proof in the beginning of the document. If a client ever loses way or expands out in a direction or scope creep happens, we go back to the principles and said, hey, at the beginning of this, the lake was going to drive this, and the solar orientation was going to drive this. We're going against our guiding principles. And what's been interesting is I think what we see are those diagrams, that research, all of the early initial investigation goes back and goes, okay, that proves it, that architecture is worth it. And then they have their end result and go, oh, I love our space. And I love our space because A, B, C, D, and creating moments in people's lives where it's not only based around those guiding principles and all of the initial concepting and direction, but they can relate that back to their built environment and go, oh, we made all these great decisions based on a lot of really good information. And it wasn't just, I needed a space and I needed it here and I want to look at this.
Yeah, right.
It's much deeper than that. And when they see that value proposition, that is the way that we're able to sell the idea of architecture at any price point. Because if you're making an investment of any from 20,000 to 20,000 to 20 million, if you're going to make a substantial investment, a portion of that should be planning it and doing it correctly, or else it can be money wasted. And a lot of times is if you're not doing that. So that's how we've been able to approach it and prove it. And then again, the next client that comes along, we explain that, and they go, oh, we get it. We get that that's the value you're bringing and the value add. And
it's funny. I just want to tag on to what you just said, and that is that this is one of the biggest investments you'll ever make in your lifetime. Yeah. I was joking with a realtor friend. We come into these houses and there might be 10 other clients or 10 other buyers looking at it at the same time. It's the biggest investment you're going to make in your lifetime, and you have to make a rash decision in about 3 minutes if you're going to throw down your life savings on it.
Yeah.
If you're going to spend that much money to invest in a dream, plan for it. Right? Take a moment and do it right.
Don't just find something that's good enough.
Don't just find something that's good enough. And there are times when that has to happen, and that's completely understandable.
We could even go into in that case, even you could even go with maybe a renovation in mind. Absolutely. For the future. Does this space fit? At least where it's at now, is this a good starting place for how I want to live and how I want to experience the place where I live? And then you bring somebody like you in and find out what you can do from there. How can we turn this into, Well,
and as Mark was saying about the document that we create, last fall we completed a project. It'll be photographed this coming fall. And one of the final walkthroughs we had in the project, it was completely validated everything we did, which was phenomenal to us, because early in the project they said we don't want the traditional notions of space, of rooms. We don't want the traditional notions of punched windows, and we purchased this amazing lot. Right? They have view of a prairie to one side, view of a forest to another, and they said we want to be in nature. And so that really dictated a lot of design decisions that were made along the way. And in that final walkthrough with the client, they turned to us and said, "Thank you. You brought." What did she say? She said, we're not missing fall this year. You brought. We are in fall, and fall is in our house."
That's a significant statement. I mean, it's simple, but it's
Yeah, she said, you brought it in. You blurred the boundary. You've broken it down. We experience the glory of fall all day in our house in different ways, in different rooms. And that kind of hit it on the head. Said, well, then I think we've been successful.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another example would be a client of ours, one of our very first projects out in Jackson.
I think I know which one. I think Aaron Kraft photographed that one.
That's right.
Yep.
And yes, it was. And it was featured a couple years ago, I think, in Mountain Living.
Yep.
But it was for an interior designer. And we had this concept where these two volumes were separated by a very transparent link because it had amazing views of the mountain range to the north. And we said, well, we want to do it in all glass. And she said, that's fine, but I worry about solar gain.
Right.
Well, we said, well, we can plan for that, right? And so using the software we use on a daily basis, we were able to dictate the exact depth of the overhang. There's always a little bit of finger crossing, and it's like, well, the math says it's right, and don't doubt math, but you just never know. So, at any rate, a year later, she sent a picture, and the agreement was as long as there's no direct sunlight in the space on the solstice, right? We just picked a date, said, all right, summer solstice, no direct sunlight in there. And so she sent us a picture on, I think, June 21st of the following year, and the sun came to the jamb of the window, or the sill of the window, and no further. Oh, good. Can't get any closer to that.
And like one other example.
Also a huge weight off our chest.
right. Which was a great message to get to. I'd say one other one that is similar is we have this project in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which Matt had mentioned already. A really unique client, probably our most modern piece of architecture that we've done so far, and we were required by the client to have the most minimalist piece of architecture, and we were faced against a ton of variances in this this development. But the client in our first meeting, she's like, I'm here because of the water, and without the water, you don't have the sky. You don't have the sky without the water, and the light of the sky and the water. So we ended up composing this entire composition of how the water relates to the sky and the light around it and the change of the water, and that it's constantly dynamic and constantly changing. And we're able to take that and create a perforated facade that allowed her to have a perfect box, Corten box of architecture with movable perforated panels that are helping to relate to the light. And it's basically a dot matrix in a representation of the ripples of the water, and it also changes with the day through the light. So we took the interpretation of the water plus the sky and her love of this. It's not ephemeral. She used, but anyways, she's effervescent. She wanted an effervescent home when it related to light and water, and we were able to create the entire facade that moves and folds and changes with day and recording of time with light. And we were able to have enough of a powerful story behind the idea of doing this to get it passed in a development that didn't allow flat roofs, facades without an articulation for like every 12 feet. There was a ton of restrictions, and we just blew through all of them just with a strong enough case about the architecture and how it related to its place on Earth. And it was that, if you can tell a story about what we're trying to do and how this piece of architecture is not only going to relate to the client and how they would like to live, and to the space that it's sitting on the globe and how it relates to the land, it's enough that can convince even very staunch design review boards to go, no, I think we get it. You guys have been thinking about this.
You mean you're not just drawing pictures of the houses all day?
Yeah, and down the way there's a house with like a water wheel on it. It's like, we're not interested in doing that. We're interested in a little bit of a different interpretation, but it was really fun to see. That just happened in the last couple of days, but that was really fun to have that pass, because it just proves the point of having that much rigor behind these designs, that it can convince a lot of people to change their minds.
And what I love about that client is that we learned from her. We learned a different way to think about a project. And we're always looking to clients to teach us. We want to learn as much as we can about your lives, but you may have a different opinion about something. You may have a different experience deep down that comes out during the design process that really teaches us something. And case in point, It's a courtyard type house. Same project Mark was just talking about, a courtyard type house. And we had a swing door for the front entry. And we said, well, that makes a lot of sense. It swings. And she said, I don't want a swing door. I want a sliding door. I said, well, that might be difficult. Not difficult, but that's a little abnormal for a front door. It's just not very functional. And she said, well, that's not my front door. I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, when you come into the courtyard, you're already in my house. When you come through that door, you're just going into a different room.
That's interesting.
So she was considering the courtyard as a very, I think in the Western typology, the courtyard is a void, right?
Yeah.
It's not part of the house. It's something that you look at. But where she was coming from, saying, no, that is a room, and I will use it. And we had to convince her to have a few hallways, because she wanted to actually use the courtyard to navigate through the home. And we said, that's amazing, but we get snow here. And so there was a push and pull, but we learned a lot about a different way to approach and think about space. So that's another reason we love what we do, because we're hopefully educating clients on formal resolutions and why things work and solar orientation of the site, but we want to learn from them as well. And I love being an architect, because every project is another opportunity to take a class.
Yeah.
You learn something.
See, and all this is fascinating to me too as a photographer. Like I mentioned, like part of the reason I'm doing these interviews is because I want to learn more about what it is that the people I'm photographing things for, I want to know what goes into those projects. Like, I don't think about all of this. I don't think about how you had to spend however much time you spent dialing in angles and compositions so that the sun didn't peek through on that one day of the year or whatever. You know what I mean? Like just those little details. Like as a photographer, we're not always thinking about that. We're thinking, okay, primarily, where does the light hit? What's the best composition? Or in reverse, what's the best composition? How does light gonna hit this best? And just capture it. But it's like going into a project, understanding those little details of all the thought that went into that is, only gonna make what I do a little easier. But just understanding what goes into that process it makes me appreciate what I do a little bit more. I'm not just taking pretty pictures of cool geometry. Which is, unfortunately, a lot of the way a lot of us think, because we're photographers first. Sure. But having a deeper understanding of our subject and what actually goes into it is going to help me make different decisions.
Yeah. So. Well, and I appreciate your viewpoint in projects as well, because we see things in one way, and we've had it in our mind the entire time. But oftentimes, you will approach a project without any of the baggage that's been developed, and you can see something new, right, that we had never thought of. And for example, my wife's a painter, but she's also a painting professor down in Gustavus. And when she sees a project, she'll talk about it in, that's very interesting, the hues values or the atmospheric perspective as it recedes in space. Right? And we're thinking three-dimensionally, and she's thinking painterly about it. I'm like, interesting. Okay, never thought about that way. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just going to ask back, because, what's interesting is we do this test in the office of if our architectural compositions and our directing, our direction, our approach, at the end of the day, when a client or a user is going to be in the building, does it eventually dawn on them the strategies, right? And that's kind of like is this a strong enough strategy to move forward where people will get it without having to have us tell them? Because that was one thing I always disliked about academic architecture, especially when you're a student, is people had always had, investigations and ideas based on something that was a little irrelevant and would never be manifested in a space, but you would never feel that. So I was going to ask back, have you had architecture that you've photographed that has been, this I don't get, it's blasé. I know you'd mentioned a different home before, but have you photographed a project that maybe you see the light move across it and go, oh no, I get where they were headed with this?
I have. There's also been times the opposite. Like they say this is why I did it, but I'm just not seeing it. So like a good example.
That'd be tough to hear.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, but it's mostly because of where I'm coming from. Like, so one of the I don't want to say it's a difficult thing for a photographer, but let's just say if a photographer had an entire day or an entire 3 days to concentrate on a project, it'd be easy to see those things. But we're coming into a house or a project with a fresh pair of eyes. We're not really becoming intimate with it, so we're not really learning anything about it. We're looking at it strictly visual. But the times when I've had a full day to like just soak in a space, you start to get it. So I photographed a project in Clear Lake. It was an architect based out of Texas, Austin. And it was the way he had designed it, he wanted to be able to kind of see the sunset and sunrise from both sides. So he kind of designed it at a fork almost. It's a very slight fork though. It's like almost enough to drive you crazy because it should, like you want to see symmetry, but it's not. So that was kind of getting in my way until we got to the end of the day. And I understood why we did that, because all of a sudden the light was perfect for the shots that I wanted to get. But throughout the day, I'm like, I don't understand this until the end of the day came. I'm like, okay, it makes a lot more sense. You could see how the light filled in through the house. So that's the thing. If you're a photographer only spending a couple hours in a space, you may not be able to soak in the reasoning or understand the reasoning for a lot of those decisions until
it takes time.
Until you're there. Yeah. Right. So it's from our perspective, it's a little challenging sometimes, but case in point, like the way I like to photograph and the people I don't like to do things where I rush through and get, 40 photos just for the sake of getting them. Like I really want to, if I'm going to take a picture, I want it to be meaningful, and I want it to, I don't know, I don't want to be all dramatic about it, but I want it to tell a story in a sense. I want it to have some kind of emotion. I mentioned earlier, I'm not so much a technical photographer, but like I'm more responsive. So like I want to be able to see something and respond to it. Like I want to be able to say, oh, that's cool. Like right now I'm looking over your shoulder at this, and I'm like, the way the light's hitting that, like that's how I photograph. Now I need to figure out the best composition for that, so I can capture the way that light's hitting. So that's how I approach things. But sometimes you just can't soak that in 2 or 3 hours.
Right.
So.
You guys make it so difficult, I must say, because I see great architectural photography, and it's one of those things in my life. I have a lot of hobbies, and I feel like I tried my hand at a lot of different skills, but I see architectural photography, and then I try to do it, and I'm terrible. I'm like, how can I want to get better? You guys make it look so good, and then you're like, I'm going to go try that, and it's amazing the jump. To get the quality of representing a great piece of architecture with a photograph, and I've always been so jealous of the people who can do it. The truth is, most of us feel the same way about each other. Like we're all always like, and a lot of it is the subject. It's like if you give me a 1972 split level home. There's only so much I'm going to be able to do with that, like if I'm a real estate photographer or something. Whereas if you give me something that was thoughtfully designed over the course of a year or two and all this planning went into it, then there's a lot more for me to play with. So if you give me a subject that has a lot of thought, I'm going to be able to put more thoughtful photography, or more thought into my photography. Unfortunately, we're not always given that opportunity. So here's me and I knew that project by Aaron Kraft, or the Aaron Kraft photograph, because I follow him. Like he's shooting these incredible homes in Jackson Hole and the surrounding area, and we don't have that here in Minnesota. I mean, we don't have the mountains behind us. We don't have the environment. Like there's just, it's all subjective. So you don't have the Grand Teton popping up.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I will say though,
with moose going in the background. Yeah.
You had asked earlier, how do we bring design to the public? And I think you're an important part of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Telling the story in a way that we can't get out of our own way sometimes, but you can tell it in a way that can reach a lot of people. And I would say not being from Minnesota originally, I'm very grateful to be practicing here, because I think as a whole, the citizens of Minnesota get it, I would say. And it goes to show with the world-class museums and theaters and the support of the arts that we have here that is really unparalleled for cities and states of our size. They get it, and they're willing to go there with us, so to speak. And so we're very fortunate to be practicing among what we consider some of the very best in the country. There's a reason why I think local firms now have won the National Firm of the Year award nationally, competing against firms in New York and the West Coast, because I hate to say it, but I think we're more interested in doing or of engaging our clients maybe here in the Midwest, rather than just trying to shoot for that next photo opportunity in a magazine on the coasts. They do great work out there, beautiful work, but I think we're a little bit of under the radar, and I kind of like that, because we can just do what we do and do it well, and it'll come.
That's the reason I titled this podcast Midwest Architecture and Design, because people are so focused on the coasts, or now Austin, everybody's kind of flocking there, and just the different hot spots throughout the country. But like the Midwest is not forgotten, but it's just not, people don't see what's going on here. So, but anyway,
and it's honest. I say it's honest design. And quite honest, it's horrible, quite honest. But they keep us, I would say, because of the
different mindset here.
Different mindset. It just keeps the design honest, and I appreciate that. I really do. It's rooted, it's grounded, it's personal. So.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. You guys, it was a super insightful conversation for me. I appreciate you guys taking the time, and once again, it was great to finally meet you in person and sit down and pick your brains on this. I learned a lot about architecture, but not so much about architecture, but just like how you're thinking about it. You guys are the first official architects I've spoken with about this, and to be honest with you, I haven't had this in-depth of a conversation with an architect about design or architecture in general. So this conversation alone has been very informative to me, and I'm hoping whoever's watching or listening to this feels the same. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
And look forward to talking again in the future.
And it was great to have that conversation. Thank you. This is wonderful, and I'm glad you're doing this.
Yeah, me too. So cool. Well, thanks again for the time, you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening to Midwest Architecture and Design. If you're an architect, designer, or builder and would like to collaborate on a project together and be interviewed on this podcast, please reach out to me at jordanpowers.com. Now, if you'd like to help keep me motivated to continue making these, just knowing that you found this worth watching or listening to is reason enough. So please do me a favor and subscribe wherever you're listening to this or watching, so that I know what kind of reach this is getting. Also, if you're listening to the audio-only version of this, you can watch the episode for free at midwestarchdesign.com. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at jordanpowers without the vowels.